Hello, my name is Alex Hars, and in today's episode we're going to be talking about John Hawkwood, an English mercenary in Italy. This episode evolved out of some research I was conducting on migration and genetics, an episode I'm still working on and I'm looking forward to sharing with you in the near future. And I came across some research from the University of York about medieval migration. It's a really interesting piece of work that shows where people came from and provides some insights into their lives. From that, I came across John Hawkwood and his son, and I learnt about them. And so from that, I wanted to actually put together this episode. The actual research itself is an amazing piece of work, and have a look at it. It's called England's Migrants, and if you go onto it, you can learn about those people. Now, let's get into the story of the notorious English mercenary. When you think of English knights in the Middle Ages, you're likely drawn to thinking about warrior kings, Henry II, Richard the Lionheart, the Black Prince, Henry V and Richard III. Knights like William Marshall were also well known for their loyalty and faithfulness, or even popular war leaders like Harry Hotspur. What you don't likely think about is the story of an infamous English mercenary who fought across France and Italy. If you were around today, the international criminal courts would be after him. This is John Hawkwood, an Essex man, an English condottiere. Today, Hawkwood is best known for the fresco in the Duomo of Florence, painted nearly a generation after his death by Paolo Uccello, which draws 4.5 million people a year to view it. But what was he like as a person? The historian Dias uses the portrait as a description of him. He says, "He was a heavy-set sort, a young ox in the shoulders, powerful of arm and hand. His brown eyes were large, calculating, and set wide apart under heavy brows. His nose was long, irregular, and came to a point. His straight chestnut hair clung carelessly to his head." A bit too romantic for my liking, and it reinforces qualities that would be valued in a mercenary captain. As a person, he is described as calculating and brutal. He sounds like he would do well as a warlord in the 20th and 21st centuries. He would pretend to retreat, ambush, and create false information about his tactics to lure in his opponents. He encouraged troops to assault civilians, and then to also murder as well as dismember and disfigure people to increase the dread and make the opposition unwilling to fight against him. He was known for sacking monasteries and churches, such as the Abbey of San Gallegano, though he still observed Mass while on campaign, and had a portable altar so that he could receive it. Today, we're used to a world where nations have standing armies, and the military is considered a profession that people can join and progress within. In the Middle Ages in Europe, national armies were only starting to form in the 14th and 15th centuries, with France forming the gendarmes and the Hungarians the Black Army. Lords and kings did have private forces that they paid, but armies needed to be raised, and mercenaries were a popular method of quickly raising an experienced professional fighting force to conduct warfare. I have a cold. John Hawkwood, also known as Giovanni Actio or John Sharp, started his life in the village of Sibyl Hendringham in Essex. The second son of his father, who was a tanner, he also held lands in the surrounding area and was a wealthy man, so how much tanning he did himself is up for debate. John started to be apprenticed in London as a tailor, but it appears not to have suited him, and instead in 1340 joined the retinue of William de Bohun, Earl of Northampton, the cousin of Edward III, as a longbowman and fought in the 100 Years' War. The longbowmen were seen as specialist troops who were lethal but were despised. They were scapegoated at the end of sieges. If the castle or town was taken, a number would be hanged as a part of the surrender of the town to emphasise that the opposing side had won. Even with the risks, military service held the chance to dramatically increase the wealth and status of a young man from a non-noble background in England, and this suited Hawkwood very well. The style of warfare in the 100 Years' War led to atrocities. The English had learnt a lot in the Anglo-Scottish Wars, where Scotland was poorer and had fewer troops, and therefore fought differently from other armies of the time. Their army was mounted, quickly moving and using the terrain to their advantage, overextending the larger, slower and more expensive English army, and attacking once the other side was running out of supplies, or not engaging at all, and so the English were forced to withdraw as the war was becoming too expensive. This also helped with raiding by going around the enemy army and attacking undefended settlements and then withdrawing. The English learnt this well and applied it to fighting France. Now the French had the larger, more expensive and more powerful army, so the English utilised chevauchés, where they strategically raided, pillaged and harmed the French population, undermining the legitimacy of the French king as he would be unable to defend his lord's land and the common people. It was also cheaper than sieging a castle, and a lord would be forced to watch his towns and villages being destroyed and massacred by mounted English longbowmen and knights, as he was unable to sally out and counter the fast, effective and highly vicious force. So having set the scene, Hawkwood fought under Edward III in the 100 Years' War against France, and the legends around him suggest that he may have been involved in the battles of Morilax in 1342 and Cercy in 1346, aged 23 at the time, and 10 years later at the Battle of Poitiers in 1356 under John de Vere, 7th Earl of Oxford. The French are going to frickin' love my pronunciation, by the way. There are quite a few Johns, with the 13th being a key player in the War of the Roses. This would have given him a great deal of experience in warfare, and especially in chevauchée, developing the harsh tactics of assaulting the civilian population and damaging the food supply. Edward III may have even knighted him, but this is uncertain and could be an aspect of the legend built up around him. Condottieri were considered to have the same status as knights, so it would not have mattered to him that greatly. Wars, thankfully, do not last forever, and after a very successful campaign by Edward III, the Treaty of Bretigny was signed at the village of Bretigny, Aire-de-Loire. This is often seen as the end of the first part of the 100 Years' War, which saw England take territory from France. It also saw many professional English and French soldiers, as well as mercenaries, now looking for ways to utilise their skills outside of being employed by the king to fight France. Due to this, several mercenary companies were formed, with Hawkwood joining the Great Company. Hawkwood's time of fighting against France was not over, and the Great Company, also known as the White Company now, moved down into Champagne and into Avignon, attacking and taking Pont Saint-Esprit on the 29th of December 1360. This was a ploy to put pressure on the Pope at Avignon. The company held the town for 3 months and damaged France further as the French struggled to collect taxes to ransom John II of France. They ignored letters from Innocent VI, the 5th Pope in Avignon, who asked them to stop their actions, and we see from sources that John Hawkwood was identified as an officer of the company during this period. As they ignored the Pope, the whole company was excommunicated, but by March 1361 a treaty was drawn up with the Pope, and they agreed to fight outside of France, either in Spain or in Italy. With the certainty of employment and combat, the company split, with Hawkwood and many others headed to Italy. Their first job was actually for the Pope. The Genoese required support. John II Pagelaos, it's the same family as the emperors, Paleologos. People are going to hate me, which is okay. The Genoese required support. John II Paleologos, the Marquis of Montefrat, was fighting against the Milanese, headed up by the Visconti dynasty and their allies Ameas VI, who was the Count of Savoy. Hawkwood was a corporal at the time and probably led a small detachment of 150 to 200 mounted men of arms and longbowmen, bringing them into Italy and lucrative work for the wealthy Italian states. It was shortly after this that the Great Company likely started to be referred to as the White Company, likely due to the white surcoats that the English wore over the top of their armour. Their conduct was not white, and they extorted, robbed and ransomed gold out of the Milanese, estimated to be 100,000 florins, or $10.5 million US, or 8.5 million pounds. From 1362 to 1363, Hawkwood and the White Company began to fight through Florence, as they had been hired by Pisa due to their rivalries of trade in the area. Again, Hawkwood showed his ability to lead, and his tactical skill during the campaign. After this campaign, Hawkwood was elected their captain. This was an achievement of sorts, as it was an international band, but due to the number of English longbowmen within the company, it may have helped him greatly with the election. The English disposition of the company meant it would not take arms against fellow Englishmen or the interests of the King of England, helpful if you ever wanted to return home. From 1364 to 1365, Hawkwood found that the religious disunity in Italy created the perfect opportunity for employment for any mercenary. Now as the leader of the White Company, he was hired to fight for Pisa against Florence in their war. He desired to sack Florence itself and had success ravaging their lands and damaging the city's suburbs, but the Pisans had not paid many of their mercenaries, and unhappy to risk their lives for no financial gain, many deserted. This was compounded by Florentine bribes to unhappy commanders. Hawkwood was forced to withdraw back to Pisa. This would set the scene for a defeat which would then shape his career for the better. In 1364 he was able to take command of the Pisan army, but was defeated as the English and German mercenary knights struggled with the heat of the Battle of Cassina on the 28th of July 1364. His forces were outnumbered 3 times, and using the terrain to his advantage, he was able to organize a skilled retreat to the Abbey of San Savino. His Pisan allies, though, were massacred, but he and his troops lived to fight another day. And at the end of the war, Florence gained some land, but Pisa continued to exist as a rival to them. Perfect for any mercenary looking for further work. Hawkwood's lively career continued with him being employed by Milan to fight against Pope Urban V, who wished to return the Avignon papacy to Rome. Hawkwood fought against the Pope's German mercenary companies, who defeated him badly and resulted in him being captured at the Battle of Arezzo. Like many mercenaries throughout history, he was not to be executed and instead paid a ransom to be released, something the Holy Father may have regretted, as Hawkwood's White Company proved to be a thorn in his side, making him constantly move his forces as Hawkwood harassed him like wolves tormenting a bull. When his contract came up for renewal, Hawkwood was hired again in Milan, and in 1372, at the age of 49, joined Bernardo Visconti. His family had been excommunicated because they were accused of joining a plot to murder John Paul XXII and for practicing necromancy, so it was a delightful family to work for, and they were hired to fight against the Pope. This was a very grey area, as there had been a truce, but both sides wanted to continue fighting and were building their forces and hiring troops to begin the war again. On the 2nd of June, Hawkwood was leading 1,000 mounted troops and was engaged by a slightly larger papal force of 1,200, the extra 200 being infantry. While being outnumbered, Hawkwood showed his tactical skill again to outflank their forces and capture their officers. While this was a victory for the Milanese forces, it ended with a continued truce between the Pope and the Visconti. Later, Hawkwood would marry Bernardo's illegitimate daughter. He became landed in Italy with property near Bologna and Parma. Today, people talk about false flag events, and I'm sure you can think of some in recent history. Well, Hawkwood's actions led to a war between the Pope and the Italian states. His contract with the Milanese was due, and he needed employment. And the Holy Father offered better terms, so he took new work with him, leading him to take his troops and raid Tuscany in what became known as the Great Raid, or others referred to it as the Brutal Wooing. He marched in down the Via Emilia and headed towards Florence. His army was full of angry Tuscans and Florentines, a clever move to make the city worried, as these people had grudges against those in charge and would gladly cause them harm. The Florentines realized the danger of an unpaid mercenary captain, capitulating to giving him 130,000 florins, or 17 million US dollars, or 13.8 million pounds in today's money, and an untaxed pension of 1,200 florins a year. This results in around about $120,000 or £95,000. The city also had to give him employment for 2 years after the event. This, though, was not enough for him, and he marched through Pisa and Siena, demanding more money from the other Italian states. In the long term, this worked out for Hawkwood. Unlike other employers, the Florentines paid on time and well. The Italian states believed that Hawkwood's actions were ordered by the Pope and not by a dissatisfied, cunning and greedy mercenary. They decided to form a defensive league against the Pope, eventually resulting in Florence, Milan, Siena, Pisa, Lucca, Arezzo and Naples joining together to form against the Pope, and the White Company had secured its future employment. This was the foundation of the War of Eight Saints. In 1375, Hawkwood began fighting for the Pope against Florence. This contract was secured at 30,000 florins a month, or $2.9 million in modern terms, £2.3 million. In December of that year, the Pope sent him to subdue a revolt in Città del Castello, but instead he assaulted and captured the city, again to make the Pope hire him for his services, and as compensation for services which he had provided, desired or not. He was then ordered onto Faenza to protect the governor in the area against revolts funded by Florence. But Hawkwood overstepped his mandate and unsuccessfully besieged the town of Granola nearby, causing him to have to retreat to Firenze, only to demand the citizens hand over their arms. As the White Company had not been paid, they sacked Firenze instead of protecting it. In 1377, Hawkwood would be involved in one of the most horrific actions of the 14th century. Pope Gregory IX ordered his right-hand man, Cardinal Robert, the future Clement VII, to attack Cesena. Cardinal Robert commanded Breton mercenaries and with the White Company fell upon the unarmed locals for 3 days, causing a slaughter that shook Italy and was widely denounced. While some historians suggest that Hawkwood did not partake in this and was disgusted, the reality is somewhat different. This horrific act was caused because the Pope had not paid the Bretons, and it's likely that the White Company took just as much from the city in lieu of late payments. Hawkwood had caused this war by increasing the tensions in Italy, but was the man who profited the most from it. Still fresh from his atrocities, Bernardo Visconti contacted him to bring him into Milanese pay, sweetening the contract with marriage to his illegitimate daughter, a large dowry and a generous estate in northwest Milan. Hawkwood was also useful to England. He was offered a pardon in 1377 for his atrocities in France, which would enable him to return to England as a famous and wealthy man. But the constant need for mercenaries and the fact that he likely really enjoyed his job kept him in Italy. The next year, in 1378, Richard II of England was looking to marry and sent his envoy Geoffrey Chaucer of the Canterbury Tales to broker the marriage. Hawkwood and Chaucer became close acquaintances, but the negotiations came to nothing. Had he been successful, Hawkwood would have been brother-in-law to the king. England likely steered his decisions more than Milan in the coming years, as he brokered a peace between Milan and the Pope, something that from the sources of the time greatly upset the Florentines, who were still paying him a sizable pension. The failure of the marriage plans to Richard II greatly affected his relationship with Bernardo, with the Duke blaming Hawkwood, firing him from his employment, and in the next year, in 1379, stripping him of his Milanese lands. To top it off, he placed a price of 30 florins per member of the White Company killed or captured, $3,000 in today's money, or £2,400. Ultimately, this meant that Hawkwood would never again fight for his father-in-law. In the early 1380s, Hawkwood would continue to fight in Italy, but he also kept an ear to the ground for events back home in England. The Peasants' Revolt meant that a lot of land in his native Essex was now up for purchase as wealthy landowners had been killed by their peasants. He took advantage of this, buying up territory and securing himself as a landed gentleman and an absentee landlord. In the same way, he started to buy up land in Florence, though he had demanded that the Florentines give it to him for free as other Italian city-states had provided him with mansions and land, but they had held their ground against him. His purchases continued, enabling him to control the old Roman road leading towards the city of Rome itself, ensuring he'd be a key player in Italian politics for quite some time. In 1381, Richard II was also looking to support his brother-in-law, the Holy Roman Emperor, with a campaign to place the Avignon Pope on the Holy See in Rome. Now Hawkwood was perfectly placed to be an ambassador to the Holy Roman Empire to help prepare for this, but as the emperor was a bit cash-strapped, it never happened. In 1385, Hawkwood's father-in-law in Milan was overthrown by his nephew, Gian Galeazzo Visconti, who gave him a contract to defend Milanese interests alongside a sizable pension worth 3,000 florins a year, or $386,000, £300,000. His previously confiscated property and his wife's dowry were also returned. Florentine sources were enraged, but he may have been encouraged by England, because once the ink was dried, he was made ambassador to Milan. Money, then England, was his greatest motivator in life. Like many contracts, this fell apart quickly, and again Hawkwood's relationship with Milan was in very poor condition. He hired Carlo Visconti, Bernardo's son, to be a part of the White Company, a man who advocated for conflict and violence at every turn. But Hawkwood again carefully planned and waited for the right moment rather than advocating for warfare. In 1385, Hawkwood was 62 years old, a citizen of Florence, though as a mercenary never allowed access to the city. He defended them from wars, but was aging. Though an old man by medieval standards, when war was called, he headed out again, and when war broke out between Padua and Verona, he went and fought at the Battle of Castanago, where he managed to outflank the Veronese forces, defeating them and resulting in the capture of 4,620 enemy combatants. Hawkwood had drawn the forces of Verona to battle by again attacking the surrounding landscape and making them come to him. His army had been established on the other side of a canal, and he tricked them into believing his forces of 600 cavalry and 500 archers were in the main body of the Paduan troops, while in fact his cavalry were hiding in the woods to the right of his forces. While the Veronans were committed to crossing the canal, he charged and engaged them, and while they tried to fight back, it was too late. His forces had the upper hand, and while the Veronans were estimated to be between 11 and 16,000 troops, with 12,000 supporting troops, the smaller forces of the Paduans and their allies were able to rout and destroy much of their army. This was his greatest victory and ensured that he could negotiate strong contracts in the future. From this, he took on a contract with the Florentines, which would be his chief obligation for the last few years of his life. Other city-states had been late to pay, and he required a stable income, combined with the fact that Florence saw war was coming, and Hawkwood was seen as a direct line to experienced English mercenaries, prized as the best mercenaries available in Italy. From 1388 to 1389, Hawkwood was leading Florentine troops in northern Italy, but was frustrated. Inaction and plague and a lack of conflict were causing his troops to become indisciplined, and where he did receive orders, they would often be rescinded or changed again, upsetting his troops further. Thankfully, opportunities to go to Naples, both years to fight against the French Avignon, enabled his men to see combat and pay, but strained relationships with his employers, who wanted him close to home in case Milan were to attack. The leaders of Florence were also divided as what to do: retain Hawkwood or fire him, or even raise their own cavalry units, which would be cheaper and perceived as more reliable than the English mercenary. While these issues were ever present, war with Milan finally broke out in 1390, meaning that Hawkwood could earn his pay through what he did best: unpredictable tactics and a cool, calm head in war. During his war with Milan, it would be his final time he commanded troops directly in the field, and while he did not win a battle during the war, he came out as the hero that Florence needed during the conflict. In 1391, while facing a Milanese army, while pressing into their lands and attempting to connect with a French army from Jean II Armagnac, Hawkwood was running low on supplies to keep his army in the field. The Milanese military engineers flooded the plain behind him by digging through the river embankments swollen with spring rain. Rather than being trapped, Hawkwood signalled that he would fight the Milanese captain, D'Alverne, the next day. During the night, he ordered his men to cross over the flooded plains and free rivers, escaping from the Milanese and saving his army's life. The Milanese forces, frustrated at Actio, Sharp, John Hawkwood's nickname, moved on the French forces, who charged into battle with little care or consideration and were destroyed. Hawkwood's caution ensured that he would be given citizenship, a pension for him and his wife, and dowries from Florence for his daughters, as well as eventually a state funeral after being interned in Florence's cathedral. In the Italian minds, the cool, calculating English mercenary with his sharp mind had proven his worth as a true hero of Florence, saving their forces while the brash French allies had only succeeded in destroying themselves. He managed to continue to defend Florence for the rest of the war, repulsing other mercenaries and frustrating Milan. Now we need to peel back some of the propaganda, because the Florentines sang the praises of John Hawkwood and popularised the idea that he was being rewarded for faithfulness, but the dowries and pensions for himself and his wife had all been proposed before the retreat was executed to motivate the notoriously fickle mercenary to fight and be able to enjoy the rewards of his conflict. Hawkwood himself, therefore, must have basked in the light of the increased fame and fortune when the city of Florence stated that he would have a statue built for him, though this was never constructed due to the cost, and instead a painting was made by Paolo Uccello, which we mentioned at the start of the episode. Altogether, this reinforced Florentine propaganda that they were the forces of liberty against the monstrous Milanese, and in their wisdom they had hired the great Hawkwood to fight for them. Hawkwood died on the 16th or 17th of March 1394 at 71 years of age, passing away probably from a stroke. He was attempting to resolve the issue of his family estates in England and was selling off his Italian estates to ensure that his family would be able to return to England and be welcomed into the court of Richard II. He desired that his wife and son would return to his Essex estates and be able to interact in the English court. Unfortunately, at his time of death, this was not resolved, and it's unclear if his body was ever repatriated back to England. His funeral was a grand parade, where 14 war horses carrying his possessions and draped with his coat of arms paraded through the city. The painting of him hangs in the third bay of the north wall of the cathedral in Florence. Ionis actius equitus Britannicus dux atius su cast... Ionis actius equitus Britannicus dux atius sue cas... Ionis actius equitus Britannicus dux atius suis caturismus.
Ioan acutus eques Britannicus dux aetatis sue cautissimus et rei militaris peritissimus habitus est.
John Hawkwood, British knight, most prudent leader of his age, and most expert in the art of war. His daughters were married off to members of the White Company, and his wife, rather than taking up her place at court in England, returned to Milan to live out the rest of her days. His son, John Hawkwood, who is the person I came across while researching migration into England, returned to England in 1406 to take possession of his inheritance, which he would receive alongside his English citizenship if he married within 5 years. This never occurred as he attempted to follow his father as a mercenary captain. 2 of his known illegitimate sons, John and Thomas Hawkwood, also received gifts. John was recommended to the Pope and given a church appointment in London, while Thomas followed his father into a career of being a mercenary captain as well. The only sign of Hawkwood in England is a memorial in Sybil Hendringham's Church of St. Peter, which is now damaged, but was recorded as being a symbolic painting of a hawk in an arch, under which is a low altar, where there had also been a representative painting, now disappeared, of Hawkwood standing in prayer between his 2 wives. It's important to note that those wives weren't at the same time, but one after each other. The painting had Hawkwood saying, "Son of God, remember me," while the first wife said, "Mother of mine, remember me," and the second wife, "Mother of Christ, remember me." So ended the life of England's most famous medieval mercenary, a man of huge fortune, luck and shrewdness. His name of Sharp and Fox truly showed his character fighting for money and loyalty to England and creating headaches and opportunities for further employment throughout his career of violence. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, and if you would like to support me further, I also have links to my Patreon and my Ko-fi account in the link tree in the description. I hope you'll join me again soon for another journey into history.